Absolutely.
But
Okay.
I've texted the group, I texted where we are and what I've been doing to push. And then
Can you guys go on mute, please? Thank you. Okay. So first of all, I want to welcome Ian and Will from KeepMe and say thank you very much for being a Rex Trusted Supplier and all the support. Ian's an amazing thought leader that Justin Tamset and I knew before he got involved with this year with Rex. So that's why I'm excited to have him share some ideas with you in the next hour. So if everybody can stay on mute, I'll have the recording sent out to you by the morning, if not sooner, to everybody to share with your teams. Thanks, Ian. I'm going to actually even go off video so there's no distractions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. Thanks everybody for jumping on today. I'm very pleased. I'm talking to you from lockdown, United Kingdom. We're just entering our 8th week of national lockdown, and just to define that, because it's slightly different, I think, in different parts of the US at the moment. That means that effectively there is no school, there is no work, there is nothing but a supermarket. It is a challenging environment to be in, but as Joel's just also rightly pointed out, all of the research which suggests that a great deal of what we're currently going through could have been avoided if this country was a little bit more on the active side of things. And we have had our Prime Minister fortunately announce that our lockdown days are coming to the end and that the industry will hopefully be able to open up on April the 12th. That will be 9 months. 9 months out of the last 12 that operators have not been open. So we can only guess the challenges we're going to see relative to operating over the next period, unless those balance sheets are in a lot better shape than we all thought they were at the start. So approach today is maybe slightly different than the way a supplier would normally do so. The intention is not to talk product. There may have been a possibility, you may have caught a paper that I wrote very recently around the fitness future. And what we wanted to do today was to just introduce some of the points around that, to try and promote some ideas and maybe get some conversation going. If we could start off by just humoring my ego and allow me to give you a little bit of my background so that you can understand where I come from and why I've been allowed to have the opportunity to speak to you today. My background is very unconventional, I guess, for our industry. I mean, academically, I'm a behavioral economist, and though I do also hold masters in marketing, I thought that was a good marriage of subjects. My career has predominantly been 15 years in fintech, working with some of the largest banks and hedge funds. And most of that was building risk management and predictive analytics for traders. I became the chief operating officer for SunGard, an S&P 500 company that's since been acquired. And whilst I thoroughly enjoyed the intellectual stimulation, I found the quarterly driven nature of Wall Street impossible to align with long-term value creation. So in 2007, whilst based in Singapore, I decided it was time to pursue some of my own passions. Fitness was one of them. And like many people, I thought, how hard can it be to run a gym? I founded my own club called Vanda and had no experience, had no contacts in the industry. And the learning curve was steep, but Vanda, which I sold 12 years later in 2019, is now credited as being one of Singapore's first boutique clubs. But you know, I reflect on the operating model 14 years ago, when we were open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we're utilizing the likes of biometric entry to get in. So we can probably lay claim to a few firsts. Anyway, around the same time, I got tapped by the Singapore government to help on the commercials of both the first Youth Olympic Games and the arrival of Formula One. Social media was taking off, and I was struck by the lack of tools available for brands to measure effectiveness. So I built a tool called Localwise. I tell you all of this so you can understand where the merging of predictive analytics, fitness, and technology comes into play for KeepMe. Vanda went from strength to strength. We moved to larger premises 2 times. We ended up at a 10,000 square foot facility in Singapore's central business district. But like any maturing business, retention increases as a factor in business performance. And we, like most organizations, struggle to make any meaningful impact. I hypothesized that the data within a club could be predictive if I could bring machine learning to it. And in 2018, I set about building a tool that would predict, regardless of what stage the member was at, the probability of them staying with us. The impact was profound on the business. We drove a 9% increase in our retention in the first 6 months. And while the intention was for it to be an internal tool only, today we sit with customers in 10 countries, including a number of you esteemed folks. I love our industry, and with my background, I've always been eager to understand how technology was involved. I've owned every iteration of the Apple Watch. I've got a Whoop band on, an Oura ring for the last 2 years. I've got Garmin's, Lumen, and I've even got a Peloton. I even have a continuous glucose monitor plumbed into my arm to look at blood glucose in real time, despite not having diabetes. My 87-year-old father rarely tires of telling me that I seem to have all of the gear and no idea. But in building KeepMe, I've also had the opportunity to have meetings and calls with hundreds of operators around the world. And I've been given access to their tech stacks and processes and had the privilege to understand the challenges and ambitions that they have as they look to build for the future. When the pandemic hit, it was clear that our industry was not only facing immediate challenges, but would also likely re-emerge with significant changes to the landscape. I'd observed the changes over the previous years, but COVID, as we're all frequently told, accelerated everything. I found myself deliberating the impact and trying to understand what future would look like and how traditional operators would be impacted. Now, I need to point out, this isn't altruism. My future is completely and intrinsically linked with yours. So I needed to get a better picture. November, I started to collect my notes and thoughts and considered writing a blog post, but 12,000 words and 30 pages later, it became a paper which we decided to publish. Operators, you guys play a critical role in the wellness journey of society, and the continued presence is essential for economies to continue to prosper and to grow. My intention was never to prescribe. Our market's too diverse for a one-size-fits-all approach. But what I wanted to do was to stimulate conversation, provide ideas, and establish a focus on what considerations could be looked at. Well, more than 1,000 downloads from 28 countries and an inbox that's daily undated with feedback and opinions, I believe there's an appetite to evolve and take advantage of what I believe is going to be a golden period in our history. So let me spend the rest of my time, if I may, introducing you to some ideas discussed in the paper. I'd encourage you to read it if you haven't and if you get the opportunity, as I can't cover much detail here. But I'd also like to encourage you to share any thoughts you have with me, whether you agree or disagree with me, as I'm a perpetual student on our industry and I want this to be part of an ongoing part of the solution rather than anything else. So, as the pandemic hit and everybody increasingly moved online, the reaction from our industry was to do the same. I think whether it be to keep members who could no longer attend engaged or a reaction to the seemingly meteoric rise of the digital providers, hybrid became part of the industry vernacular. And if we take aside the massive challenges that come from trying to consistently deliver quality digital experiences, I believe the approach has another flaw. It encourages us to think about the digital offering as some type of island, part of a dual offering of on-site and digital.
Have a good day.
Now, granted, consumers now do have an appetite, experience, and maybe even a habit formed around digital, but they're going to see it as a complement to their overall wellness journey. There's no doubt the digital element will remain, but the consumer will not be looking to most operators for the digital services. What I believe we're going to see is consumers looking to add digital services to their wellness experience that complement or enhance the desired outcomes. Why would you replicate your traditional experience when you've got the ability to add mindfulness or stretching or another discipline? This is the overarching statement of the paper. We should not view things in the term of a hybrid business model, but instead look at how we play a part in the new ecosystem that seems to be developing. So let me explain what I mean by that. Fitness, wellness, health, call it what you want, but we have to face the fact it doesn't come solely from visiting the gym 3 times a week. And I think consumers are increasingly becoming aware of the many variables such as sleep and nutrition and recovery and mindfulness, to name but a few. The rise of digitization has provided them with the access and the opportunity to bring all of these elements together into their ecosystem. So what I've done is try to put together 6 rules to help us to navigate and plan for the future. First one is recognizing that gyms are not the sole guardians of our consumer wellness. Now, customers no longer see us as the sole guardians. They're aware that their wellness incorporates many areas, and the gym is one of them. I think education around the importance of sleep and mindfulness and recovery is probably as commonplace as exercise and nutrition content. And with the devices and data available to them, customers are increasingly aware that they've got more control. It may not even be necessary to have a relationship with a gym. Now, we're going to argue that's been the way for some time, but the last year certainly accelerated that. The awareness isn't just around education, but also the fact that they carry in their pockets and on their wrists the ability to measure more physiological data than probably a sports scientist on an NFL team had available to them 5 years ago. So when you accept that you're no longer the sole custodian, you can establish what part you will play, and that's going to be very prominent. We are a deep part of the psyche of the consumer, who's seen our facilities as the temple of fitness and wellness for decades. However, in the evolving landscape, a product that bases itself just off location and equipment within is not exactly sitting with a deep protective moat guaranteeing a prosperous future. Arguably, if we look at industry retention performance, this has always been the way. But now with the rise of the digital option, consumers have the ability and indeed the capability to design their own journey, create a more comprehensive experience, and through digital interaction, move to broader outcomes around their overall health. If we give up trying to be the sole custodian and move to building our position with the customer's ecosystem, then we become part of the outcome. If we acknowledge there are other components, build our product and interactions to support these facts, we'll increase trust and ultimately our long-term place with the consumer. I'm not saying there's only one role for gyms. I think there's an opportunity here not only to double down on our position, but to increase the importance, which will drive new revenue through increased retention and all the benefits that brings. I don't think we should look at trying to deliver everything. Some are going to try, but the consumer's expectations will be too wide for one organization to be able to fulfill sufficiently. And that goes exactly the same for Apple and Peloton. So if you pardon the pun, let's dial in and look at the smartphone. I think as operators, we can be guilty of seeing it as no more than a place to house our app. In reality, with all of its sensors from gyroscopes to GPS accelerometers, they're effectively physiological labs. Add a wearable into the mix, and there's a treasure trove of data that intentionally or not is carried around by consumers within Apple Health or Google Fit. Now, could consumers join these dots themselves into a meaningful picture? It's unlikely. I think many people even struggle with the difference between a HR and a HRV measurement. But this is where true personalization moves from getting their name correct on the club newsletter to delivering value to the customer that feeds into their experience as well as their ecosystem. They're already becoming more aware themselves. I mean, Whoop informs hundreds of world-class athletes like LeBron James and many tens of thousands others more like me, whether we should push or recover each day. Think this won't be a thing? Well, if you take a look at Apple Fitness, straight up integration of their wearable into the product. Anyone want to bet that Apple's done embracing the metrics and adding sensors to the watch? I wouldn't. Or how about Equinox announcement of their integration with Whoop for their members? If you can put aside, as I'm trying to do, that their PR team seems to have lifted a large chunk of my paper to publicize the launch, it's another clear indication of the direction we're moving towards. But we don't have access to these types of tools, many of you will say, or we struggle to get class scheduling working on the club. Well, let's take a look at how we can strike a balance between the physical and the digital to get to our advantage. Let me take you through a little app journey, which I have, right? Something I built to give you an idea of what is possible and what inevitably is going to become mainstream in the next few years. And I hasten to add, this is not KeepMe here, this is me. On waking, my app congratulates me on meeting my sleep requirements. Following an active previous day, it also prompts me to hydrate and suggests I start my meditation routine, selects which program I wish to use from its library. My recovery score lets me know what level of exertion I should attempt today, including my non-gym activity. And it also noted that I'm on a 16-18 intermittent fasting protocol. And through its integration with my Human, my app suggests optimal nutritional macros for the day, at the same time as setting a notification to alert me when my intermittent fast is completing. It's got access to my schedule, Knowledge of my optimal workout requirements, I'm given a recommendation to train between 2:30 and 4:30. My location suggests I'm currently on a business trip, so options are presented to me using my ClassPass. 3 providers are identified within 400 meters of my expected location at that time, with the selected sessions appropriate for my target exertion level. 1 click and I'm booked in. Completion of that workout, I'm prompted to take appropriate hydration, suggested post-workout snack, all in line with the knowledge that I'll be having my evening meal at 7 p.m. to meet my fasting deadline. It's also suggested I'm in bed by 10 to meet my recovery requirements from the day. Presented with an overview of my activity for the day, my behaviors, and how all of this is combined to impact my progress. Summary of tomorrow's plans presented along with a progress update on my month to date. And as bedtime approaches, I'm presented with a suitable soundtrack to assist my sleep. This is not my future. This is my reality. I'm bringing together my ecosystem utilizing products such as Google Apps, IFTTT, Zapier, and iOS shortcuts. And as I mentioned, Equinox is now delivering something similar, and this will become more and more mainstream. I often get asked why the industry hasn't driven these changes themselves and why it is the arrival of maybe new entrants that's driving it. Well, I think that's always been the way in any industry and always will be. Competition drives changes through necessity to survive. But I also think that operators benchmark themselves against the tools available in the industry. So if they have one of the considered top apps for club management or mobile, they satisfy themselves that they are where they need to be. After all, you can't purchase what isn't available, but it is this that's left operators exposed to some of the new digital entrants, as it limits their capabilities and indeed creativity, because the requirement for innovation is not aligned with suppliers' need to extract revenue from their developed products. The example I gave is a subset of what one Turkish operator is looking to deliver to their customers this year. They sat down, spent their time developing their understanding of what part they want to play in the ecosystem, and decided to place their mobile app offering at the center. Now, realizing this wasn't remotely possible with the one-size-fits-all products, they're building it themselves with an outside development team. Now, the message here is simple. When you acknowledge that digital product evolution is going to be a critical element of your business in the future, you need to have some ownership in it. You cannot wait for suppliers in the sector to do it for you always. Now, you hear stories of lead times amounting to months for people to have a new field added to some platforms. But for some of you, the idea of driving this type of change will leave you in a sweat. But the market is going to adapt. We're going to see new providers arrive to service these requirements, and they're going to come with more flexibility than incumbents. This means that we need to stay on top of the digital evolution. We need to understand the changes and the changes that are available through suppliers so that we can start to integrate them in a more timely fashion. Let's take a look at a quick example of how we could integrate the ecosystem within our offerings. Let me paint a realistic picture of the typical personal training experience right now. Mine, I hasten to add. Every week, I attend to be guided and motivated towards the achievement of my goals. The expectation is that the trainer is aware of these goals and that he or she tailors that session appropriately. But even if we suggest that is the case, and suggest with some confidence that very rarely does the intensity of the session vary, it only really represents a small part of my overall story. I attend these weekly sessions in a variety of conditions. I may arrive on a Monday following a very physical weekend, or I may arrive on a Friday having had a stressful week of work with limited sleep. To benefit my body and mind and move me towards my outcome, the session needs to account for this. Not doing this will be detrimental and most likely actually move me away from my goals. Conversely, imagine the positive impact on trust and credibility if on my arrival, my trainer were to congratulate me on the active week, outline a session for that day that focused on recovery, and even better, if that was all followed up by some guidance on what to do away from the gym, as well as encouraging me to get some sleep based around my personal requirements. Now, gaining access to that type of information required may be what you may believe that to be quite hard, but in a non-analog sense, it's a case of building a review of the member's Apple Health into the start of the session. In a digital sense, building an integration between a club app and an Apple Health is actually quite simple. And if your member is wearing a wearable, and let's face it, with annual shipments of over 300 million and doubling each year, that's likely. So the ability of a trainer to review key data on the member record before a session should be compulsory when you consider the outside returns such an action would likely bring. A point I have made continuously is that the mobile phone is the ultimate competitor. It's here that the consumer is carrying the capability to purchase wellness, whether it be class bookings, meditation apps, online training, as well as track their progress and understand the impact of their actions. But there are some changes coming here also, and understanding them is going to allow you to plan how to take advantage. Let's start by not underestimating the impact of 5G. With speeds of 100 times 4G and network latency that's faster than human visual processing, this is not only going to change our mobile experience, but it's also going to be the beginning of the end of cable and broadband internet. Always on, lightning fast, 5G is going to be capable of delivering 8K video content without buffering, guaranteeing a very high quality experience for consumers. Now, when you combine that with the Wi-Fi protocol changes of last year, something called version 6. Don't worry about it, and you certainly don't want to waste too much time reading it, but it was released in 2020. What it's allowing is a massive increase in device density within sites. So the utilization of mobile and wearables is going to become easier to deliver a potentially richer user experience. But let me point out something which I don't think is fully realized around 5G either. This is the first time we're going to have the capacity for mobile apps to use sophisticated AI algorithms and crunch massive quantities of data. The reason, very simply, is that with the advent of 5G, we do not rely on the processor within the phone, as we can now send the data at lightning speed for processing to, say, Amazon Web Services and receive the results within, without the consumer even noticing. Whoop already employ this mechanism to allow it to analyze thousands of data points it accumulates, and the use case for this when it comes to personalization will be massive. Then there's VR and AR. Ever wonder why we didn't actually get to see as much of these as we expected? Well, we're not expected to see these become part of everyday life. Well, any hardware-orientated progress requires hardware adoption, and it was always going to be a tough ask to have individuals taking high-powered PCs and connecting themselves to a web of wires. But that's going to change again. Personally, I'm far from convinced around VR for fitness. I have, as you may not be surprised to hear, 3 VR sets. And for anything remotely animated, you get hot very, very easily. However, augmented reality is different. And we have the capability to do that today through our phones, and probably to a whole new level with the anticipated Apple glasses that are going to deliver in a completely normal form what Google Glass would not be able to do because of 5G. I've talked a lot about the practical uses for AR in a gym setting and some work that we're working on at the moment, so I'm not going to cover them here, but in the paper, page 25, if you were to take a look, you'd be able to get some better understanding. Coming up close to the end, so rule 5. And this is more within the KeepMe sweet spot to some degree, but let's reimagine the customer journey. The hallowed member journey, the jewel in the crown of our strategy as we look to guide and encourage our customers to their desired outcomes. In reality, the majority seem to exist to guide them to our outcomes, the operator's outcomes. And I won't many friends from saying this, but I've yet to see one that's completely member outcome focused. A member journey should be an opportunity to build trust, drive communication, and establish a long-term two-way relationship, not be a case of trying to challenge MailChimp to be able to deliver personalized communications. In my experience, member journeys are well-meaning, but mostly generic, and they're often infrequently or poorly executed due to the number of moving parts. Those that are delivered, normally too simplistic, quite frankly. I think consumers expect a personalized, curated experience. They get it in most of their everyday experiences now, from what they watch, what they listen to, what they purchase, buy, and visit. The tools exist to personalize, and delivering member journeys at scale, and those that embrace will I suspect those that do are going to see some quick paybacks across their financial metrics. So let's look specifically at the first one, at retention, an area where we know well at KeepMe, and how when AI is applied to the member journey, we can drive improvements. If we could understand accurately, and consider this for a moment, if we could understand accurately if a member was likely to continue with us and crucially, in a time window that would allow us to change a negative outcome, that would clearly be invaluable. Now, regardless of your business model, if you feed a basic set of member data into a machine learning model, say, I don't know, 45 items, right? Age, gender, attendance, it will generate around about 8.8 million decision trees. Now, none of these are statistically significant, but when you combine it, you are left with an incredibly accurate prediction of member behavior. This knowledge, whether it be about a member who's 9 months left on a contract and highlighted as an attrition risk, or another on day 9 of a 30-day rolling contract, can be used to craft personalized content that is relevant and at the minimum will result in engagement levels 5 times generic. It sounds great. And yeah, we've got an example of a customer who's actually seen their LTV increase by 1 year since they implemented this approach. But the beauty is, whether you have 500 or 500,000 members, you can do this. And this is where Rule 6 comes into play. Insights are of absolute no use unless action is taken. This is something we learned to our detriment quite early on at KeepMe. When we set up KeepMe, we got this huge adoption around the AI insights. Customers loved to see how they were doing and what predictions told them. However, much to our dismay, it ended there. And what was worse, their likelihood of consistently logging in decreased to 0 the moment negative insights were presented. And I'll be frank, it had us very worried. From many calls, some difficult and some avoided, what became clear was that the insights were valuable, but they struggled to be able to leverage them. Every day, many opportunities for improvement were being uncovered. While the customer could see what to do, they lacked the capability to deliver consistently at scale. The solution was automation. Now, this is a word when mentioned gets the defensive body language going, especially in the more senior practitioners in our industry. Nothing's ever going to replace human engagement, they'll tell us. The best ways are labor intensive, they say. And yes, they are hard, but that's why they work. Well, you won't get any argument from me, but let me say this. It's very often I find that the human engagement is actually generic because of a lack of member insight and then also driven to the members who are least in need of the added engagement. Bottom line is that automation should be embraced and used to provide increased relevance to the member at scale, consistently freeing up your human resources to focus on high-value engagement. Your welcome mails, birthday greetings, appointment confirmations, milestone achievements, all of these impact our relationship with the customer. Too often are not reliably occurring due to a need for human intervention or other complications. But these are just basics, and knowing some of the fine organizations that we've got on here today, I expect you're constantly striving for improvement. But let's finish off with some examples of how AI, when added to automation, can drive real revenue improvements. Say you offer personal training for purchase as individual sessions or in packs of 5 or 10. Your AI can first identify the customers who will purchase from you. It can then segment them further into members most likely to purchase each of the particular packs. This ensures that not only do you drive revenue from your membership, but you do so without leaving revenue on the table. So, Andrew would buy a 5-pack, but he's just as likely to purchase a 10-pack, so serve him that offer. Kate, meanwhile, is highly unlikely to want anything but a single session, so don't scare her off with a 5-pack offer. Bank the 1-session sale. Add automation, and you have AI working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to find members who want an offer before serving them with the correct one in a piece of communication at the very least is relevant to their age and gender and delivered in the optimal engagement format for them, all with no human intervention. The potential is massive. We've got a customer adopting this approach that's increased non-dues revenue by 43% in the last 6 months. And the use case is highly flexible to encompass many, many different areas. How about using AI and automation for dynamic pricing? Say I'm an operator providing a multi-activity facility alongside fitness facilities. I also offer an outdoor pool and racket sports. These outdoor activities are somewhat seasonal, and in the late spring and summer months, I duly see a surge in membership joiners. I then see a rise in terminations as autumn draws in. Now, if I introduce AI and automation, however, I can now offer memberships that suit customer requirements. My AI will predict for me which of these newly signed members will prove themselves to be summer only and which are likely to extend past that. For the summer only members, an offer is dynamically served to them at the optimal time to propose another tier of membership, one that reflects the reduced facilities in the winter months. Then, as the winter passes and spring commences, the automation will serve the revised summer upgrade membership seamlessly and without the need for staff intervention. Gyms, in my experience, already offer a number of different membership plans that incorporate entitlements around facilities and times of day when members can access the premises. When we combine AI and automation, each member could be provided with a dynamic membership price, say each quarter, that best reflects their use of the facilities. Adoption of this approach would move us away from this binary member, non-member relationship and provide a more customer-centric approach, one that will drive lower attrition and build longer-term relationship as members see the commercial part of the relationship centered around their requirements. I've many more examples of this, and quite frankly, if I had the time, I'd be on for hours talking about different ones. But we're working at the moment on driving referrals from MPS, optimizing class schedules for retention. But I've gone long enough. So what I will do is I'll encourage you to read the paper, where I have tried to go on to some significant detail in quite a few of these cases. Before I open up to any questions, I did want to let you know that we do have another paper on its way, looking at how we can leverage your data and AI. The subject was very much driven from the feedback from this paper, and hopefully it's going to equip operators with a solid understanding of how it can benefit your business. I am well aware that you get thrown the terms of AI and you get thrown the terms of data at you on a regular daily basis. What we're trying to achieve here is to equip you with an understanding of the relevance to your business and hopefully give you an understanding of how that possibly could relate to a rollout over the next few years. On that basis, I will shut up and I will open to questions if there is any there, and hopefully bring Will back in as well.
Well, thanks, Ian. That was wonderful. That was eye-opening, and everybody should have the paper. If you don't, send me a note. I'll resend it to you, but we sent it out to you a while ago. So let's open it up to any questions. And I'm going to change the screen so I can see everybody. Okay, so you don't have to put them in the chat. If you just want to raise your hand or speak up, if you have any questions for Ian or Will at this time. I know that was a lot of great information. So anybody, okay. So we've got, we had over 65 people on here, and we'll get this. Let me just slide to the other screen, make sure I didn't miss anybody. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll throw out a question since nobody else does. Ian, one of my challenges is that we're sharing an awful lot of personal data that I could see, if it gets into the wrong hands, it could be used against us. And I think even the UK has seen some of this, where based on lifestyle choices, and this may seem a little far stretched, but I think we can see what's happened in the past and say it's possible that, well, you haven't taken care of yourself, so you don't deserve for medical care. Do you have any concerns about that, or them looking at your lifestyle choices? And it could be used to lower your health insurance costs, but it also could be used to justify raising your health insurance premiums.
That's true, right? You can definitely work on both ways there. And in fact, we have there's a very active insurance cohort over here, which is actually driving the variable of health insurance based on your activity levels. And that is actually integrating tech. In fact, they very famously give out Apple Watches, which just goes to show the margin these guys actually generate. But I think from a data perspective, I think there's two things you need to be aware of there, Joel, is that logically you control access to the data. You as the operator have that aspect of it. When you work with a data partner, the ability to anonymize the data exists. Okay, so what they need to know, they do not need to know the name of those individuals. Okay, they only need to have an ability to uniquely reference that individual when it comes to the actual building of those aspects. So I think data security remains a core component of anybody's, whether you be an operator, whether you be a provider's necessity and strategy. And in our case, it's something which is incredibly important because we have these really onerous laws in the UK and Europe called GDPR, which, they really are very, very challenging. And it's one of the reasons why we, even as an organization, have to keep data infrastructure in the United States, data infrastructure in the UK, continental Europe, and in Asia, and then segregate those geographies to make sure that the customers have got their data within, so that we've got compliance and the customers feel that they've got comfort. I don't think anyone should fear asking those questions when they're looking at
I'm not, maybe I need to be more clear. I'm not concerned about an operator abusing this data, but I think we've seen, we see a cancel culture being created based on things people may have said or done 5-10 years ago that were not nefarious at the time, and they were not ill-intended at the time, but they're being manipulated today. And if they can do it on a social level, because we think we can control the data, but Apple and Google and some of these other tech people, they have it all. That's more where my concern is. And again, I see the vision for what technology can do for us.
So we're seeing.
The concerns, yes, Ada, that's what we're seeing. I have concerns of not what they can do for us, but what they can do to us. No, I'm not talking about the fitness operator.
Okay, right. No, and I get that as well. And listen, I don't. I think that we've got the next 5 years. We're going to see it's going to still be front and center of virtually every discussion as we evolve this through. And we're going to see increased regulation. We're going to see more government intervention. There's going to be a whole host of different things that take place as we're around it. Do I foresee that the benefits that organizations and can I use the word mankind without making it sound a little bit grandiose? But if we can utilize those, then I suspect we're going to still see the progress. And that what I hope that will happen is that the manipulation of the data, or the necessity for exposure of the data, will reduce, and the methodology that's used to actually give the results will get better, so that we've got less of the possibility for those type of things to happen. But yeah, I completely agree with you, John. I don't think anyone would disagree, because it's clearly a very prominent part of the media cycle whenever these subjects come up, and quite rightly so. I mean, we're going through it, as you say, in the UK at the moment. We've got a very prominent US organization that's taken responsibility for our NHS app very recently. And it is that particular relationship where the NHS has apparently done a deal for the princely sum of £1 for the entire data. Right? There is no way that I would want that organization having that level of data on that size, but they're the reality that we exist in.
£1. Boy, that sounds pretty fancy there.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Ian. Anybody else have any comments or any questions going forward? Let me see, somebody in the chat. Nate has a question. He said, did you address the best metric to influence a new member in the first 90 days?
Oh, that's so my world doesn't try to do that, because my world wants to suggest that that metric is going to differ per member. So I kind of get a little pissed off when I get this dogma about the fact that we've got to try and get every member to attend 4 times in the first 3 weeks. And as long as your receptionist uses their first name 4 times, that's all the secret is. That dogma bullshit has been around for as long as I've been looking at this industry, and it's produced absolutely no results today, right? What I am trying to suggest here, Nate, in very specifically, is that the capacity to try and treat individual members with more personalization that's going to give that things. Because let's face it, the attendance of, for instance, a 55-year-old such as my good self is going to differ quite widely from a 23-year-old student. And when we start to bring into play the other measurements that we may be doing in there, what we want to be able to do is to bring it down to the individual basis. Fundamentally in retention, and I've ran, I don't want to say 5,000 of these algorithms so far, attendance is always going to be one of the largest aspects. But increasingly, in the last 6 to 12 months, We found lead source, where they came in from originally. We found price plan. We found commercial agreement and a whole host of other aspects of it. And Will and I would love to be able to do a beautiful mind moment where you gave us a whiteboard and I could write you out this phenomenal diagram on there, which would show you all of the different variables. But the reality is that when you're dealing with this type of aspect of it, there is very large differences, even across multi-site operators of the same brand, based on geography and even based on the type of lead marketing that they actually have in place.
Thanks, Ian. Nate, hopefully that answered your question. Great answer, by the way. Anybody else have a comment or a question as we're wrapping up? Okay, thanks, Ian. Thanks,
Thank
Will.
you.
Wait, Frank's got one. Frank's got one.
I was good, Frank, sorry.
Sorry, Eddie. I mean, you got a full hour here. I mean, we might as well just use it, right? So,
Hey,
No,
Frank, how
sorry.
you doing?
You're on my third page. I didn't see you, Frank, sorry.
sorry, Eddie. Well, I'm on lots of people's third page. So, hey, Ian, who all do you integrate with now from a core operating system, et cetera? Maybe you talked about that. I got on just a little bit late. So.
Well, to be honest, Frank, we kind of stepped away from that and didn't do it. But I mean, in the States at the moment, obviously any of the ABC, obviously the club automation products as well as in there. So any of the DAXCO products are on there, even Spectrum. So we went through that as well, because we do quite a bit of work up in Canada where they still got quite a bit of an element to it as well. Obviously on the ABC side as well, and Mind Body as well. So particularly on the smaller aspects of it. So they tend to be the main ones that we do on there. Perfect Gym as well. They seem to be coming in on and some aspects of it for you guys as well. Yeah, I would say that they were the main ones from a club management perspective.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, anybody else have a question? Robert, is that a question that you're putting in the chat? I see you started typing. Okay, I guess not.
Okay, I'll throw another one out. Ian, you've got all of these different apps and technologies that you're sampling. What would you consider if you were encouraging somebody to dip their toe? What would be number one, number two, number three? Just even as a consumer. And please tell me that putting a needle in my arm isn't at the top.
Yeah, I know, and some people will regret Frank saying we got an hour. Let's use it. When you put a question like that to me, no, I'll be honest that I have used them all, and in fact, I even have them on my desk. My wife, I've got that cupboard behind me. It's like a graveyard for fitness tech. To be frank, the thing that's influenced me personally the most has been Whoop, and I think because it doesn't attract any of my attention on a daily basis, and because of the level of recording of the data that it gives me. So fitness tech does well when it simplifies itself. The moment you have to start getting involved in a conversation about heart rate variability and heart rate and those aspects of it, you're going to lose consumers. But when you can simplify things down into a recovery score or a daily progress and use a numerical value, but at the same time, do so with a great deal of, should we say, complexity to back it up. How can I explain? So I've had this for 2 years now. And in this particular, the Whoop to me has been important because it's removed my necessity to guess in many ways. Okay, so I now know that alcohol probably plays a worse part in my overall fitness. You know, of course, yes. I don't need a rocket scientist to work that out, Milan. I get that, but the impact on my sleep and the recurring detrimental impact on my recovery, right? I could be knocking out 10Ks on a daily basis and doing 3 strength conditioning sessions a week, but the impact on my overall fitness due to maybe 2 nights of business-related alcohol content was during lockdown, right? It definitely has played a part, but also where they're very good specifically, and Aura are kind of there as well, is that they record a lot of my information. So they will record where they're, for instance, what medication am I injured? Do I have any COVID related? Did I wear earplugs last night? Am I taking melatonin supplements? All of these things that ask me quickly, boom, boom, boom questions. And then at the end of the week and at the end of the month, I receive a report which tells me what impact these things had on my overall recovery scores. I think in any time, and I'm a technologist, right? So UI plays a part. And when you've got a nice little attractive screen, which paints a picture without you having to do too much delving, that's great. And I think that's one of the reasons why Apple Health is probably struggles to some degree, because there's so much information in there. But if I can, at the end of a week or at the end of the month, make a small change to my behavior, it's going to accumulate over time. So the short answer is Whoop. And the reason why it's been Whoop for me on a personal basis is it's made it abundantly clear that if I make this change, I'm going to get a potential improvement in the result. And if I don't, that's my choice. Whereby maybe with the Garmin, which I've gone over there, and the rest of the stuff, there's lots and lots of data. If you just took the Whoop into your own setting in a gym, and I turned up and you're just about to start me on my PT session and I showed you my Whoop and it was red, that's your immediate decision to say, listen, Ian, not today, recovery. Let's concentrate on recovery. Let's get some form worked out. So you've got another appointment planned for 2 days' time, right? Get to bed early tonight. Let's see that at a green. We're going to push for PBs in that 2-day period.
Okay, 2 questions. Can you spell that for those of us who don't speak the Queen's English?
Whoop.
And spell it.
I would have classed Whoop as a lot more American on that aspect of it, but
Whoop.com. It's the best. It's the best thing out there, Joel. So
WOOP.
WHOOP.
That's the one. Yeah,
Okay.
and Will and the team, they've done lots and lots of good. So I'm seeing new stuff coming out all the time. I've bought most of it.
Okay. Next question. What do you think is the most overrated technology that you see people getting sucked into that you think is just a waste of time and money? Because you've got that big graveyard. What's
This one's dicey. This will be a longer answer than the last one.
No, we can't. I don't know. Will and I have the same conversations because since he's been with us for over 12 months now, and I've probably spent most of his discretionary income on new tech kit because he's seen me with it. Listen, I think that the best kit's always the stuff you use, and the worst kit is the one that you don't. And I think what we're seeing an awful lot of these days is people trying to complicate more tech. Right. I think that the best tech is the one that's redundant, particularly if it's a wearable that stays on you and doesn't have the necessity to be charged on a regular basis. If you can get a piece of tech that becomes part of you, like my continuous glucose monitor, I think that aspect of it on there. I think there's a lot of overstated in there. There's a lot of metrics, which I don't think have a whole host of relevance on there. But if I was to say what was the worst one, that would be a pretty tough call. I think what I'd like to think is that I've refined my choices over the time and improved them. And therefore, that's why I'm where I'm at. If I had to retrospectively go back to any of them, I don't think I'd find that too much of a hardship. I'd still, suggest, I wouldn't want to bet against Apple Watch. That's one thing for certain. And I think we're going to see an awful lot of improvements in some of these areas as we go through. Wearables is going to change. 5 years' time, we will not know we've got the wearable. This continuous glucose monitor I wear, right? I used to have to stick it in my stomach with a needle. Now it's here on my arm. It takes, 5 seconds to get done and I don't feel it. And it's there, day in, day out. So we're going to see a lot of changes. And I think the clothing we wear is going to be our wearables in the future. It's not necessarily going to be after something that we're even going to be putting on our wrists or, in my case, injecting into yourself.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Ian. Great question. Anybody else have another question? Ian, I've got one that I know came up last week in one of our roundtable calls, and a few of the members are on here. It seems that most club operators today's world are getting hit with, dozens, if not 100 different add-ons to their business. And while I personally believe a lot of them have a lot of value, the question is, like, how do you pick? How do you choose? If you had to pick one type of something that a club operator, given your background of all the technology, what would be a benefit?
Can I reverse engineer that a little bit and say that one of the challenges I find in conversations is that operators are always trying to pigeonhole based on the technical stack that they have in place. So, got it, what, you're a CRM, or you do this or you do that, you replace this, you replace that. My thought is very much, what is the business outcome that you're actually trying to achieve? And if that is, so if I'm looking at the tech stack at the moment, what have I got to try and drive, particularly taking into account the competitive environment? I want to drive measurable improvement in a metric, and that metric should be ultimately revenue based. So how do I improve retention? How do I convert more of the leads into sales? How do I uncover subtle aspects utilizing the data that's coming in? I think there are a lot of tools out there at the current time, but I think an awful lot of them are tools looking for a problem. And I think as operators, we've got multiple problems that we could get better at that would actually bring down to that aspect of it. So my advice predominantly would be, don't try and pigeonhole or look at existing to look for replacement. I would be reevaluating my tech stack on a 12-month basis, on the basis that the market's changing so fast at the moment, and having a look at where it looks at. So I've just, I'm coming off an engagement at the moment with a big group in Europe called Homes Place, and they had a very elaborate ecosystem of which they were absolutely adamant they were going to replace certain chunks of it. They then hire a new chief executive who comes in from Ticketmaster, right? He's totally immersed in e-commerce, data, and those aspects of it. And he had no interest in understanding what the existing infrastructure was. The entire strategic review was based around, what are the outcomes for the business? What are the tools that we need to be equipped to be able to move to those? Because what happens too often is we get to the end of the year and we're blaming the tech stack for the performance of the business or the opportunities missed, when the reality is that we have the capacity to change the tech stack. It's the other variables which we obviously don't have as much control about. So I'm moving that around a little bit. And rather than trying to identify, we definitely have limiting technical aspects in this industry, because we've had, shall we say, incumbents for a long time that have grown somewhat complacent in that area. But we're going to see those changes, and I think that's going to be the benefit of us all.
Okay, great. I agree with the answer. Great answer. And Matt had one question about, do you integrate with Jonas?
Yes, I should have mentioned Jonas. Will's done one very recently up there with on the Jonas side of things. So yes, we do Jonas as well. We see them a lot more over in Europe than we do in the US, funny enough.
Okay, great. All right, any other last questions before we wrap up from anybody? Okay, I want to say thank you both, Ian. It's been a great conversation, great insight, hopefully inspirational for everybody. I'm going to resend, with your recording, I'm going to resend your paper. So everybody has both of them there at the same time. Feel free to reach out. Will is based in Washington, D.C., so he's in U.S. time zone.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Reach out if you have any questions. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of the week. Safe weekend. I'll see everybody next week on our Rex Roundtable calls.
Thanks very much, Eddie. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.